Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Industry Perspectives. I'm your host, Ainsley Bowden, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Stephen Spohn, the COO of Able Gamers, and someone I've looked up to for quite a while in the industry. Now, Stephen needs no introduction here, but as part of our Good in Gaming initiative, I wanted to talk with Stephen about the continued work for accessibility within the gaming industry, how developers can take advantage of some of the resources they provide, and how gaming outlets have a responsibility to cover this information and report on it. We talk about all that and more. Let's get to it. And we are live with Stephen Spohn, COO of Able Gamers. Stephen, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, the honor and the pleasure is all mine. So thank you very much for agreeing to do this, and really looking forward to chatting with you. So as I was just saying before we started recording, been an admirer of yours and the work you've done in the gaming community for a long time now, and it goes without saying. Well, maybe it doesn't go without saying. So we'll say it, right? It is admirable, and I think you've done a tremendous amount for a lot of people, and I think that's just incredible. So definitely kind of a role model of mine in the community. So just wanted to say that right up front.
I appreciate the kind words.
So real quick, Stephen, and I know you've obviously probably touched on this more times than you can count, right? But for our viewers, a quick background on, if you don't mind, on Able Gamers. I know that Able Gamers has been around for over 15 years now. 2004, I believe they began, and you've been there nearly that entire time, if I'm correct. A little over 14 years. Is that about right?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, and for the last nearly decade or 8 years plus, you've been the COO.
Yeah, it's been a gradual climb. So Able Gamers was started as just a blog and a dream. Like it wasn't ever meant to be the gigantic international charity that it is now. We kind of got there accidentally. But it was really supposed to be a website that just had information for people with disabilities. The founder, Mark Bartlett, he really just wanted to help Stephanie Walker, one of his best friends, when she had an MS flare-up.
Right.
And there was no information out there. There literally was nothing on the web on how you could continue to play games if you were disabled. And Mark just felt the calling that he needed to put this resource out into the wild. And he started making articles and writing things down. And the only reason I found him was because of one of those articles where he wrote about how you couldn't play World of Warcraft if you only had one hand. And I play with a special hat that I use and my mouse. So essentially, although I'm using two hands, I essentially use only one hand for all intents and purposes. And I was like, "Dear Mr. Smarty Pants Mark, you're wrong. I am right." And fortunately for me, he didn't throw me out an airlock. He instead was like, "Oh yeah, well then write something better yourself." And I was like, "Okay, I will." And it was 100% both of us just being stubborn, and it turned into this amazing thing where that one article really gave me the mental fortitude to be like, you know what? I do need help from myself, and that's why I found Able Gamers. But in helping other people, I found a greater calling, and that has been the beauty of what Able Gamers was and what it's become. It was originally just about a couple of guys trying to tell the world that disabled people playing video games matter, and today it stands as a nonprofit organization that creates opportunities to enable play in order to combat social isolation, foster inclusive communities, and improve the quality of life for people with disabilities. And yes, there is a chip in my brain that literally reads that out.
I was just gonna say, I think you said that once before, maybe.
It's At this point, I'm fairly sure I can do that in my sleep. But it's just a bunch of fancy lawyer talk for that we help people with disabilities be able to get into the video games industry by any means necessary. Not for the games, but because the connection between friends, family members, and loved ones is that important.
No doubt. No doubt. And am I right in saying that for all the work Able Gamers does and how well known the company is now, and everything that goes along with it that you just touched on,
Yeah.
it's only 11 people. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, it's 11 people with 9 of them being full time. So, and a third of those have been hired in the last year. So, for a long time, it was just Mark and I.
Wow.
The first 4, 5.5 years was just Mark and I, and then we met this wonderful man named Craig Kaufman. He was just going to PAX East and just doing the gamer thing and trying to do some good for the world on his own. And we kind of kidnapped him and said, "You're with us now." And we led him along this journey. It really has been, the last 5 years have been such a turning point for Able Gamers. Doing this for nearly 15 years of my life, I would have never imagined being in the place we are now, where more developers talk to us than don't.
Yeah, it's really incredible. In fact, as I was kind of doing my research of the details like that I didn't know prior, that one really stood out to me because it's just, I have to imagine you're a very busy man.
Yeah. There's more work to do than we currently have the people to do it.
Sure.
That has been one of the fun things about the last couple of years of Able Gamers. Twitch donating the $1 million and whatnot.
Yes.
Really helped, because people think about organizations and they think about, well, I'm giving $5 to be able to buy this controller, and in some respects you are, but a lot of it is the people you're paying for. The person that will sit with a disabled person for 8 hours. You're paying for someone to be able to go home and eat food and have a place to live so that they can do this and help people with disabilities every single day.
Yeah.
For the more than the first decade, none of us at Able Gamers earned a dime. We all did this for free, but that meant that we had to put 40 hours into Able Gamers, 40 hours into a day job, and it's just a lot. So, shout out to the donors out there, because they're really the ones that kept us going and believed in us before the industry did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about too, is, it's kind of strange because it's not like this is a new issue, right? I mean, this is an issue that's been around for a very long time. But from your perspective, and I would say, obviously, you're one of the people who can give the best perspective on it. It feels like, from my point of view, as though accessibility, the need for it, obviously, how many people it impacts, all of the kind of aspects of it, it feels like that's finally getting spotlight over the past few years in the gaming industry, at least a lot more than it ever did before. Do you kind of agree with that? And, what's your kind of hopefulness or feelings around those kind of things that are happening more recently?
Yeah, it's undeniable that the industry is paying more attention now. There's definitely a wave of change happening across the electronics consumer industry as a whole, where, everyone seems to be a little more cognizant now that people with disabilities actually exist. Surprise. So, it's sad it took this long, but only a couple of years after the ADA, they finally have figured out that people with disabilities have money that they can spend. It's really weird.
Right.
And I've heard this from several people in very high up places in other industries, that the ones that are looking at accessibility are looking towards gaming as one of the breeding grounds for where accessibility got pushed. And I think it's a lot because of the passion that runs deeply in the gaming industry, right? So yeah, Able Gamers was one of the forefront leaders. We were the ones out there at the tip of the spear, as they might say in the military. But it's only thanks to people getting behind us. A lot of people don't understand that we were funded only by individuals, just $20 at a time for the first 13 years, and really would have went under if it wasn't for them. And back then, when we would go to, say, a GDC, there's a really great video on YouTube called One Question, where we literally just asked developers, have you ever thought about gamers with disabilities? And most of them said no. A few people said yes, and the one jerk laughed at us and walked away. So
Wow, really?
yeah, still on YouTube. Yep, feel free to go look up who that guy is. So it's one of those things where it has come from that to where we, as you said, we are busy all the darn time, and it feels good. I'm glad we're busy because it means that we're making change. But it's thanks to all the advocates out there who do their part, and the organizations that like Gamers Outreach and
Yes.
St. Jude and whatnot that also say, hey, we love what we do, but also make sure you pay attention to people with disabilities trying to live life at the same time. So it's really different than it used to be in the industry where things were sort of against people with disabilities, and then although we still have struggles, I feel like now it's getting easier to be in this place.
Yeah. 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 It's nice to hear. And obviously, as you said, right, there's always plenty more work to do, but it does feel like there's this progressive movement to finally kind of get over that hurdle of, as you said, even just acknowledging it. I mean, that's the beginning of it, right? Is you've got to get acknowledgement before you can actually be foundational for change. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly. It's when we used to say in interviews when Mark and I would do these together, how we wanted to be the first nonprofit that put itself out of business, and just eventually we get the industry to the point where it's like all right, we did it, we can walk away now, and you know we got there. We got to the point where places started being accessible, games started coming out that were accessible, and we realized that it wasn't just as easy as throwing a banner on an aircraft carrier and calling it a day. Like there was more work to be done, and there still is more work. And even if we convince every dev in the industry that people with disabilities matter, there's still people out there that need help. So
yeah.
I don't know that we'll ever get to be done. I think that this company, I'm hoping, will be a legacy that we leave to another generation to push forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. One of the other things you kind of touched on there too, in collaboration with some companies around the industry,
Mhm.
is when I was at E3 in 2018, is when Xbox was first kind of unveiling the adaptive controller,
Yep.
and spoke to one of the designers there, and I was really impressed by it. And again, in doing my research here, it sounds like that Able Gamers was collaborative with
Yep.
some designers at Xbox on that device. Is that accurate?
That's correct. We worked in secrecy for 3.5 years on this.
Wow.
So my favorite funny story to tell about that
Yeah.
is a wonderful human being named Bryce brought us into this conversation very early. Me and my fellow able gamers, Craig Kaufman, we were sort of the first on scene, so to speak, in a meeting with them, and it was so early in prototype development that Xbox/Microsoft legal had not approved us as human beings to see this device, but yet they had called us to give our pain points and our perspective and learn from us. So they literally started drawing it on a piece of paper because legal didn't say they couldn't draw it. They said we couldn't see the physical product. So
Sure. Sure.
it's my favorite thing to talk about because it was and I'm sure that loophole has been closed because I've told this story too many times now. But there was nothing in the language that said you can't draw it either. So yeah, we got to help out. There was a spiritual predecessor called the Adroit that we did with
Mm.
Evo controllers, which
Yes.
was
Yes. Yes.
yeah, it was the same exact device. There's no difference between an Adroit and an XAC, except for that it's a lot cheaper. The XAC is built by a mega giant company with
Sure.
a lot of big machines that can do this, whereas the Adroit was built one by one. So they listened to our pain points and listened to what we had learned, and took that under advisement in combination with a lot of other organizations, and the XAC was born. And then I pretty much ran around with Craig for 6 weeks and talked about how great it was in every outlet there was. So, you know, um, and that's a good point to mention as well for anybody listening. Like
Yep.
it definitely sometimes gets mistaken as this kind of magic bullet, and it's not. It is just a device, and all props to everyone involved for creating it. But it's not the catch-all be-all. There are tons of other devices, and there are situations where the Xbox adaptive controller is completely useless
Yeah.
for a person. I personally can't use them, but I do use an XAC in conjunction with a Freedom Wing, which lets my wheelchair be a controller. So it's like
Mm.
there's always different ways you can use things. But it's I always think it's important during these conversations to talk about how it's not a fast food menu, right? You
Mm.
can't pull up and be like, "All right, Steve, I'll take a number 6 with extra fries." Like it's not how that works, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the breadth of what you're combating or trying to aid, right, is very
Yeah.
broad, and so yeah, I found that interesting because in fact, I think, yeah, right behind me, I have a XAC pin on this pin board
Yep.
that Xbox gave me when I spoke to one of the leads there, and I just always find that fascinating. So it was
Yeah.
interesting to see that you guys helped on that, which is cool.
A little bit.
Yeah. So we talked about, I think XAC and kind of awareness and spreading awareness, and I think that's obviously translated into someone sitting in my position, what are really great and wondrous things for yourself. So it's no secret to anyone watching this probably that you were recognized as Global Gaming Citizen, at the Video Game Awards 2018, and then South by Southwest, excuse me, end of last year as the Champion of Change.
Yeah.
So, which I believe right after your 40th birthday, right? So, yeah, I mean that's got to feel. I mean, how does that feel to kind of be on that level where it gives you the much larger platform, right, to speak about the things that are important to you and enable gamers?
I think it's a combination of good and bad. When we think about accolades and positions, we always think about the bright shiny spotlight and how wonderful that is and whatnot. And there are perks to having that kind of platform and those many eyeballs on you. I've got maybe the second largest disability following right now, which is pretty great. Ricky Bulwark out there with a lot of followers, but he doesn't really do charity work, so I'm
Right.
probably one of the most well-known charity guys. So that comes with some weird back and forths, just like anyone. I've got my detractors. I've got the ones that don't think I'm doing enough, that think I'm doing it the wrong way, that would like to see me do it differently. And, it's really hard because at the end of the day, for the most part, you all just want to see the world be a better place. And sometimes there's some unnecessary roughness that gets in the waters when you get this many accolades where, you're trying to do the right thing and not everybody agrees with the way you do it. And at the end of the day, you can only do the best that you can do. And no
Sure.
person is a monolith, right? So I'm, visibly disabled, obviously, profoundly disabled, but that doesn't mean that I can tell you what it's like to be blind better than a blind person or deaf
Sure.
better than a deaf gamer. You should always take into account some more voices than mine. And, if I can at least start the conversations, if I can, be somebody who at least brings attention to it, then I feel privileged to do that. And hopefully the people who don't approve of the way that I do it will eventually come around and decide that, I was doing the best I could at the time.
Yeah, that's really fair, and it's really interesting because I don't think that would be something that would be widely thought about.
Yeah.
It feels like it's excellent work, and you would think that those groups would be almost a unified front, if you would, to kind of push that change. But I can see exactly what you mean from where you sit, how that would be challenging at times.
A lot of it is society, the way that we have structured things. Just from talking to you a little bit off camera, like you have a lot of this in your life where you have experienced these kinds of worlds, and you know as well as I do that there's only so many spots at the table, and so although all of us want the best for one another, well, most of us want the best for one another. That there are only so many spots, and there as we push, more and more seats become available. But we all know in most minority groups that there's only so many people that can grab the spotlight at any one time. So it
Yeah.
becomes this thing of some people get upset that so and so is out there when they could do better, or so and so is mad because this person slighted them one time, and it sort of becomes this sad nature of everyone becomes a little competitive with each other because the people who are at the very top don't give that much attention to it. So it makes you feel like you have to almost be competitive with people who are also pushing for the same thing you want.
Right.
And so, I do my best to go on, shows like yours and say, hey, listen, we all want the same thing. And, I hope by myself and others repeatedly saying, hey, listen, I know it feels like we're in competition for a spotlight, but, don't look at it that way. We're all just trying to push the narrative. And it's thanks to everyone using their voices together that things like, the Twitch tag system is now in place.
Yes. Yes.
So, again, the power of more than one combined.
Yeah, I saw that. That went in rather recently, right? It's something you've been pushing for a long time.
Yep, it's been something I've been very vocal about on the internet, yelling at Twitch quite publicly, and
Right.
and I have been told more than once that they're well aware of me yelling at them. I was privileged to be in some early conversations about that, but it by far was not a me thing. It was I had a hand in it, and so did a lot of the people, the organizations that were listed on the thing when it came out. And I think that's what's going to continue to be important. Is I think when I first started my role in the industry, it was yelling and getting attention and making people listen to whatever I said. And now I think it's turned to I have to get out there and I have to continue to be vocal for people with disabilities who don't have the same privilege of a large platform that I do.
Right.
But to also use it to say, hey, don't only listen to me. You don't
Sure.
unfollow me, but also follow this other person. Like this, it's not a choice. You don't have to choose one or the other. You can follow 100 different disabled people. It's okay to do that. And that's one of the things that I think all minority groups are continuing to push for, and you see that in a lot of different, LGBT people of color. It's literally the same message of don't listen to just one of us. There's a bunch of us out here with different voices, and sometimes I feel like I'm just beating that drum at this point continually. But until people start doing it, I'm just going to keep beating it.
It's a sad necessity, right?
Yeah.
Something that has to be done because that's just how you eventually overcome it. So, on that point, right? I wanted to, one, congratulate you, but also discuss, the announcement back in November with Alana Pierce and yourself and the coordination for the, Game Accessibility Awards, which is awesome, right? So, how has this may be a redundant question, so I apologize. A rhetorical question. I apologize if it is. But how has the response to that been? Has that kind of gone the way that you had hoped when it was obviously being discussed prior?
So far, so good. This was 100% a thing that Alana wanted to do, and I've just privileged to call her friend, and don't tell her I said that. It was great. She told me about the project and that she wanted me to be involved, and I was like, cool, yeah, I can give you some advice. She's like, no, I want you to be like there together, do this thing. I'm like, gosh darn it. All right, well, so we'll do this thing and we'll see how well it's received. And it was great. Everybody loved it. We continue to both get told how great that it was, and so our plans are to do it again, and hopefully eventually one of the big shows will be like, here's a budget, go make it great. Until then, we'll just keep using green screens. But I think one of the things I repeatedly see is that when you're trying to do something like that, and you're very willing to say up front, I don't know if we're going to do this the right way. And that was what you heard from us repeatedly when we did that was, listen, maybe we're going to mess this up, but here's the best way we could figure out how to do it. Here's, what we did. Here's how we got to the conclusions we did. We brought in other voices. We made sure to showcase other gamers with disabilities. It was not just us. We were just the hosts, really. And the point of that again is to share that spotlight and use those platforms to elevate others. And to say, here's what other people thought. Here's what they brought to the table for accessibility. And so by doing that, I think you lessen the amount of people that can feel like you were doing it for anything but the right reasons. And
Mhm.
I think that is one of the things that I try to tell people when they're doing things. Like, you don't need permission to start an award show. Just go do it. You don't need you don't need permission to start a new blog. You don't need permission to go start another Able Gamers. Like,
Right.
figure out a new name or something, of course. But just like if you want to help people with disabilities, just go do it.
Yeah.
And I say all that basically to say you're asking, how do these accolades feel, and and how are things received? And I always tell people, it's, for me, for my dollar, there's no secret to our success. I can tell you right now, on recorded medium, how Able Gamers got to be where it is. We worked really hard. Like,
Yeah.
that's it. That It sounds like a cop out. It sounds like a blow off answer, but it's always, we saw that there was a need, so we just went and did it. We didn't ask permission. We didn't, go out and say, "Hey, is it cool if we do this now?" We just did it, and it worked out.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, but you're right. I've even talked to other creators, right, where they kind of ask around a community of people who may already be doing something, and kind of ask those
Yeah.
similar questions. Can I do this, or and it's like, well, why can't you? There's nothing
Yeah,
stopping anyone from contributing in a way that you feel is appropriate, right?
never makes sense to me. It's like, it's not a presidential campaign run. You don't you don't gotta poll the room to see if enough people are gonna vote for
Right.
you.
Right. Yeah. Just do it the best, figure out what you want to accomplish and go for it.
And
Um,
realize that the first innovation of it is going to be bad. I don't know about you, but I have spun up shows. I did some. They didn't feel right. I didn't like them, so I stopped doing them. Same
yes.
thing with Able Gamers. The Able Gamers, of 2016, it looks nothing like 2012. Looks nothing like 2007.
Right.
Because we just kept figuring out how to do it better, and so. I'm constantly just telling people, just, even like with your show here, like you were telling me before, you wanted to do some good and some good gaming. Like, there's, it's in the title. So that's, uh,
Right.
do some good for the world. And, again, just go out there, do your thing. And, if it clicks, if it works, great. Keep doing it. Figure out how to make it better.
Yeah. Exactly right. And we don't certainly need to go into it, but I've had my fair share of failures in terms of shows and content, without a doubt. So we don't need to talk about that.
I think it's okay though. I'll rebuff you on that point. I think you should talk about it. I think that one of the things that we do wrong in especially American society is
Yeah.
we hide our failures as if there's something to be
It's fair.
embarrassed about.
That is fair. Yes.
I honestly believe that with all my heart. It's like, we take this thing as, yeah, some things I tried didn't work, and it's like, well, no one thought that you were gonna hit 100% coming out of the womb. Like, you're like, you're gonna fail a couple times, and it doesn't seem to matter how many times we talk about how, Einstein failed a bunch before he got, the
Right.
equations. How, Edison failed on the light bulb. How, Zanga literally put out, 32 games before they hit Farmville, and then they blew all the money on a giant building, and then they went bankrupt. Like, it's like, so, goodness gracious, just try things, see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think the will to try is should overcome any fear of failure, for sure. So on that front, right, in terms of content, and what you see around content creators, be it in the space or not directly, as I said, the Good in Gaming is something my outlet is doing, and we're obviously a smaller outlet, but what do you see? Do you feel there's a responsibility and or need, or just your thoughts in general on the major outlets, right, and then the communities that create the broad content that is shared globally among millions and millions of people, aiding in this way, right, helping to further spread that awareness and spread a message, and kind of focus more on, one of the big things for me is really focusing more on positivity. And sometimes it's a battle, right? I talk all the time on the show around the battle for both attention and there's the clicks and everything else, but spreading that positive message I see as a responsibility, and I think it should be a bigger part of what the people who have the power to make those decisions and publish that stuff should be doing on a regular basis.
They should. They absolutely should. And here's the thing, right? So I'm gonna answer your question with a story. So
Sure.
when I was at my very first PAX East as Able Gamer, so this was, oh my god, 2015, 16, I don't, or maybe even earlier than that, 2014, whatever the hell PAX was. It's been a long pandemic.
Yes,
You
it
know,
has.
we had like a little, like what we called petting zoo, which was just like a table with controllers on it, pretty much, where I was showing press members, different
Sure.
ways that people play. It was really kind of cool to open some people's eyes. And
Right.
I'm sitting there with a blogger, who has maybe 12 or 13 viewers. Starting out, not necessarily super huge, but a very lovely human being. And
Okay.
in the middle of the conversation, Andrea Renee
Yep.
from one of the big outlets pops up and says, "Hey, I'm Andrea. I'm here for our 12 o'clock. I'll be ready to talk whenever you are." And I'm just like, "Hey, Andrew, really nice to meet you. I am with so and so right now, and I'm going to finish this up, and then I'll be right with you." And then I turned back and went back to talking to the
Excellent.
creator, who labeled themselves as small, and they were very aghast, and Andrea was like, and like it, and it was one of those great moments where you're like, all right, here's who you are. And so I finished up the interview and turned back to Andrea. She's like, I just have to tell you that, like, nobody does that, and I absolutely want to be friends with you now. Like,
That's
nobody
good.
puts me on hold, and they immediately turn their attention to me, and that was, we've had a good friendship ever since then,
That's
because not only not only did I do that and kind of shut her down to, hey, I'm with another client, but also she was very much like, I wish more people would do that.
mhm.
And that's the kind of people you want to network in this industry, and find the ones who care about other people. So because
Sure.
you never know who's going to watch, right? So it's the same philosophy of why I don't look at viewership numbers or Twitter followers when I make an appearance on any kind of podcast and whatnot. I have my people go to see, are these good people? If yes, then I'll do it. Like, that's pretty much what it's all about for me. Is, are they trash and just gonna throw around slurs
Sure.
and whatnot? Then I don't want any part of it.
Right.
But if they're good people, just do it, because here's the truth: you never know who's watching. You never know. You call yourself a smaller outlet, but who knows if one day somebody who has a lot of influence reads you and then they promote your stuff, and then
Mhm.
suddenly you're not so small anymore. And that's what happens to creators, particularly on Twitch, all the time. You're floating at 50 viewers, and then one day Dr. Lupo comes in, gives you a raid, and then every day after that you have 500. So it's the way this world works, and you just got to put your product out there and make the best you can and be a good person.
Yeah. No, that's I thank you for sharing that story, because one of the things I talk about very often is genuineness, right? And having been fortunate over the past few years to meet a lot of people and a lot of creators across the industry, there is, we're just saying facts here, right? There are people who base their entire interactions around how big someone is or
Yeah.
how many followers they have, and we talk about on this show all the time, and it's disappointing, right? Because
Mhm.
everyone started from the same spot.
Yeah. Yep.
And there
Yep.
are genuinely amazing creators out there who have almost no following. They're either new
Yep.
or they just haven't been discovered yet.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's a great story, though. I almost ran into Andrea in 2018, but I didn't get to say hello. I'd love to actually meet her sometime, because she just seems like a lovely person.
She's
Um,
really awesome, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good people like her in the industry, and my advice to people is always, someone like me is never going to go on the Twitter and be like, these are the bad people you should avoid. But
right.
you can see, if you find someone in the industry, in any industry that you're listening, and you're interested in getting involved in, find people that you consider good, that you consider have the right motivations, and then watch who they interact with. Who they interact with frequently tells you who they consider good people.
Hmm.
And then if they only respond to certain people when they're called out, or like, oh, here's so and so and so and so on a podcast, well, that was arranged. They didn't do that on purpose. That was where they were put onto a panel together.
Right.
Right? So look at who they choose to be around, and that tells you who they really are.
Yeah. That's very fair and to the point, if you will. Yeah, that sums it up.
Hey, that's the great part about being 40 is I've rapidly reached the point where I just say it how it is. You know, you don't like me, don't like me. That's fine. But here's how I see you be a good person. Then that's what I'm going to tell you. And there are sometimes people that are like, you're pretty blunt. I'm like, sometimes you got to be. Life's too short, man.
100%. And I have fair to say I am older than you, but we're pretty close. You know, we're both seasoned gamers. That's what we call them here. That's why my site is the name it is, right? Been gaming since the Atari era, and but to your point, there is perspective that comes with that, right?
Yeah.
And
Listen, I literally went on to an interview yesterday, and they asked me what the first thing I played was, and I mentioned an Atari, and then they cut for a production break, and they were like, to the host, they were like, have you ever played an Atari? And they were like, I don't. And he was like, I don't know what it is. And I was like, oh no.
Oh no.
Oh well. All right. Well, okay. So we'll just shoot that part over. Sorry.
Yeah, and you know, it's the industry now. I know for someone who has the perspective of what we grew up with, right? Yeah. It's so, one of the things to talk about frequently is so drastically different today. And I think that the gamers who have come in, say in the last 10, 15 years, you know, just having grown up in the past, you know, that right decade or two, they have really no concept of what gaming was like before internet, before it being social, before it being cool. Right. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, when we were young, it was a niche, and a niche for a lot of stereotypes, you know, at the time.
There was a lot of people who hated anyone who had anything to do with gaming for not really any good reason. Just oh, you're a gamer. Okay, well, why don't you like them? They're a gamer. Okay, well, why? No. That was like always where the conversation died. There was never anything like, oh, they're mean or they're jerks. It was always, well, there's a gamer. Okay, well, that doesn't explain anything. That's like saying I hate you because you love the color purple. Why do you hate purple? I don't know. I just do. Okay.
It's completely true, though. You know, we laugh about it now, but you know, it really was an issue.
It was.
So it's funny. You know what? One of the things I talk about in that vein, it's kind of a good segue to discuss, is just the gaming community at large. How different, we just said how different it is now than it used to be. But for me, and I don't know about you, but gaming has always represented more than the games themselves, right? And I think it ties back to what we were just talking about, is because of the way it was looked at, almost like outcasts, if you will. There was a camaraderie there that developed over time, right? And as you got to be friends with people, and you became friends around gaming, there's this old school for people kind of our era. I feel especially this camaraderie and brotherhood, having grown up in that, and it's always meant that to me. I don't know. Do you feel the same way? Do you kind of have that same outlook on gaming in general? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's definitely still that mentality that we all have of, you know, oh, you're a gamer, so you get it. I mean, there's still definitely that stigma, that toxicity. I think, honestly, that's one of the reasons that it took so long for able gamers to get traction, was that not only were we fighting for people with disabilities, which are already overlooked quite often, but also for gaming, which, you know, in the early 2000s was still in the, you know, is that a real thing? You know,
it's true.
So I think we were fighting two stigmas at the same time. So I feel like, you know, there's certainly something to be said. You know, you can hear it when you go, you know, when we're talking to your gaming buddies, and they're talking about, particularly about their significant other. It's like, oh yeah, she's a gamer, he's a gamer, you know, so they get it. You know, like we can be in the same room and not talking, and it's cool. Like, you know, it's stuff like that. You know, and I think that other communities have that same kind of camaraderie. You know, book lovers and, you know, macrame artists. I don't know. I think they have that same, but I don't know if it's the same level of bonding. And I think a lot of it comes down to shared experiences. I think that video games lead you to having shared experiences with people, you know, that even that you don't necessarily like, you can end up having a good time in the same party in the game because you're sharing this experience and you're like, oh, that was awesome. I still don't like you, but I guess you're all right. And that's that kind of weird, bond you formed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you touch on something else there too, is, I've, due to the experiences I've had in my life, one of the aspects I've covered in some of my writings about how gaming has helped me and others is escapism.
Yeah.
And what gaming can do for you, exactly kind of like you said, is it allows you to kind of escape in some way, but also bond with others in a similar, who may be either in a similar mindset or trying to do something similar. And I know you've spoken to previously, even in some of your videos, around first kind of experiencing that with gaming. And how important that was to you. And correct me if I'm wrong, by all means, but kind of opening your eyes to what gaming could do for not only people with disabilities, but just, people facing any kind of struggle or challenge in that vein, right?
Having that connection point is really what it's all about. And the escapism is, there's two weird things about what we do, and it's escapism and fun are sometimes treated as if they are bad things that
Yes.
it's like, well, what's wrong with not wanting to hurt for a while, and and the problem, I think, is always that the slippery slope, which is one of my most hated arguments in any arena. It's like, if you play video games, you're going to eventually marry a donkey. It's like, that's not, the freaking jumps you got to go to get there.
Yeah.
And number two, Gertrude's not that bad, so don't make fun of her. The thing of it is, I'm going to hear about that one. So the thing of it is, when we're talking about, escapism, it's getting away from the badness for a while. When we set up expansion packs from Able Gamers and at hospitals, it's literally to help make a room where people can forget that they are in a hospital for a little while. And it's just video games and some silly posters and some plushies, and it just makes it feel like a fun room instead of having an OR and an ER 3 doors down. It just lets you forget for a minute. And I do wish of all the people who are not fans of video games and push against them, that they would stop linking having escapism to being a bad thing. It's not bad to get away from your problems. No one in your situation, in my situation, is saying put your head in the clouds, kids, and don't ever pay attention to the real world. Walk around with a VR helmet in the middle of the streets. Like, nobody's saying that. No, none of us are saying that. All we're saying is, if you're in a lot of pain, and you need a distraction, go play a video game. If you're lonely, go play a game with a friend. Like, you don't have to go to the extremes.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't have said it better. And I part of what I've written about pretty extensively in this vein is exactly that. And also, there's science and data that backs a lot of this up. This isn't just us talking about it and saying our opinions. There's a lot of positives that come with gaming in that vein, which again, is all part of highlighting this, right? So, so Able Gamers, we've touched on obviously the tremendous work that you've done over the years in the organization. I know you currently have the campaign out there to raise $1 million. And where are you currently on that?
$750,000. And that's fantastic. And that's just from basically my network of friends. That's not Able Gamers proper. This is something I decided to do outside of my work hours, just because of my position in life. I know a lot of people that are cared for by a lot of other people, and it's been the weird thing about having Spohn together be such a recognized thing in the industry, as people keep thanking me, like, holy crap, you raised so much money, thank you for doing that. And it's like, well, all I did was go out and light the pyres, and then people answered my call. It wasn't it wasn't me that did all the heavy lifting on the fundraising. It was everybody goes after Shroud and Dr. Lupo and Pestily to go raise millions of dollars. But what about all the people that can raise $150? What if you just use the power of togetherness to combine forces, then you can do something really good. And
Mm-hmm.
that is fully my intention with Spawn Together. Is we're gonna hit the million, and then I'm gonna take a lap in the press circuits and say, listen, stop just assuming that because somebody can't contribute more than $25 that they're not useful or productive. That is such a negative, unnecessary stereotype
Correct.
in our industry. You don't need to make people feel bad. The amount of people who have said to me, I can only contribute $50, Steve. I'm sorry, it's not more. It's like that is $50, and I grew up freaking poor. I would have done a lot of things for $50, like
Yes.
eating grasshoppers. Like there's a lot of gross things, And it's like $50 is a lot, and sometimes people forget when you're raising $1 million, the $50 still matters because
Of course.
$50 times 500 people is still a lot of money.
Yes, 100%. And yeah, I think that's critical, and it's that's fantastic to hear that you're at the $750,000 mark. I hadn't realized that, so congrats, and yeah, looking forward to kind of what's next there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, part of what we do, we donate to your organization, of course. That's how we first originally kind of spoke through email, and Special Effect as well. And I also play for Extra Life, which is a very similar concept, right? You're just allowing small creators or content creators to, whether it be $1 or $2 at a time, it's a everyone coming together for kind of the greater good, which is it is kind of weird to see people feel almost bad or apologize in those senses. It's like you're doing more than you are the core of what this is. Without you, the whole thing doesn't work.
Exactly. It's more sad, I think, than weird. It's sad to me that we have and Extra Life and whatnot was part of the problem, not the charity, but the culture that developed around it, where it became this competitive nature.
Yeah.
And it's I only raised this much, and I raised this much, and it's the leaderboards can be fun, and they can be oh man, I really want to do better. I mean, heck, Tiltify put up a leaderboard last year, and I think I was like 7th on that leaderboard of how much money people were raising. And I'll be darned if I didn't be like, next year I'm getting top 5. Like, it's the competitiveness is fine when it's for a good reason, but at the same time, if you let yourself get down into the weeds there, you're really gonna start to feel bad, and that's why the numbers game in any profession is just a losing game. Whether you're talking about, an outlet with your numbers or an outlet like IGN, I think I'm safe to say that you guys are probably a couple off.
A few hundred.
Just a few. And that's sort of the thing is, if you start looking it down to the numbers, it's like this amazing thing of being in the middle of the ladder is what I've been liking to talk about recently, where it's like you look down and you see people who aren't doing as well as you are, and you look up and then you go, oh man, but there's so much people that are above me. Well, I guess I'm just trash. And it's like you completely forget about the people who are still climbing underneath your rungs as well. And so we somehow applied that to charity, which I don't know how that got from A to B, but it did. And one of the primary drivers of doing Spawn Together the way I did was I didn't want to reach out to corporations and raise money from them. I wanted it to be a completely human driven thing. So maybe in future iterations I'll bring in some prizes or whatnot for things, but I just wanted to prove as a concept that we all should be cognizant of the fact that we matter as individuals.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point, and I think perspective in any matter like that is always important, and you do. People and organizations can lose sight of that, and so that's very pertinent that you bring that up, because it is absolutely true. So
I think about people like Dr. Lupo, who are is a friend of mine. Full disclosure, I'm definitely a fan of his from outside the friendship as well, and so I respect him. But the reason that I wanted to be friends with him, and then eventually did get to the place where I could meet him, was he's very genuine. When he's feeling bad about his numbers, when he's got only 10,000 viewers, he says he feels bad. And his feeling bad is just as bad as when I feel bad that I am only pulling in 90. And when some of my friends are only pulling in 8. Like, it's the same bad feeling, because it's a no-win game. You never win the game. It doesn't matter how many accolades, how many numbers you get. You're always like, why don't I have more numbers?
Yeah.
And so you learn that as you make friends along the way, that it's just a losing game to play comparison. And so, hopefully we can try to retrain society, and I'm hoping that something like Spawn Together makes people who quote unquote only raise $200 decide, wow, I could do that for other causes too, and I could do that 6 times a year, and that $200 suddenly turns into 1,200. And so, it's just those little incremental things, one thing at a time.
Yeah, fair enough. So with the with Able Gamers now this year in 2021, and you kind of doing this campaign separate of that, kind of what's next for the organization? I mean, what do you guys kind of really? Is there anything you want to talk about in terms of planning? Any kind of big focal point for you guys as a group right now, and what you're working on?
Yeah, a lot of what we're doing is enabling our people to reach members of the community faster. So right now, you have to wait months in order to get help from Able Gamers, and it is something that we absolutely despise. Like, there is,
Sure.
never a day that goes by that I'm not unhappy about, how long it takes us to get to people, and it's because we don't have enough peer support counselors to serve the number of people that are asking for help. Every single day at ablegamers.org, people reach out and they ask for help, and every single day they're on Facebook and Twitter reaching out to us individually, and we're having to be like, hey, you can't go through us individually, you got to go through here, and we show them back to the website, and it's frustrating that we've done this all on a very little ad budget. We don't have magazine ads. There's no banner flying over New York City. This is just word of mouth.
Right.
So, once we do get to the point where we start advertising in magazines and whatnot, I can only imagine how many people that are going to be looking to us for help. So, our biggest priority right now is restructuring things internally now that we've gotten some bigger donations and we've done things like Twitch and Spawn Together and stuff like that we can actually pay some people to come in and help us be able to help people faster.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's obviously noble, and I'm sure that's some of the challenges around that have to be frustrating, as you said, I can imagine. So.
Sometimes, yeah. And the other cool thing that we've been doing is we started up a thing called Accessible Player Experiences, which APX for short. It's something that has been helping the industry in a big way. We have been going through and helping developers to figure out how to develop with accessibility in mind. Okay. So for anybody out there who's listening, you can go to accessible.games right now. It is a free resource. There are design patterns where you can learn how to design a game, whether you are with a AAA studio or you are with a one-person independent developer. You can go on there and you can learn not how to be an accessible developer in a checklist format. Like, it doesn't tell you like, yeah, make sure you turn on subtitles and don't use the color orange and stuff like that. Like, it tells you, okay, so here's a problem that might happen. What if someone has a tremor? What if someone has the inability to remember that they did something? What if they click on the wrong button because they didn't have the strength to push the one that they want? Oh, well, then you need undo, redo. You need the ability to undo what happened and try again. Like, that's an accessibility pattern that we teach at accessible.games. And so there's, a literal card deck that you can buy and put on your desk that has, all this stuff on it. Where you're learning how to be a more mindful person for people with disabilities, and for the studios there's an entire course that you can get. If you have seed money to be able to pay for the certification program, we'll actually say like, okay, this person is a certified practitioner, and you can carry that with you to any of the studios, and it helps let them know that you are somebody who has put some thought into accessibility.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So I hope if any indie developers or anyone else for that matter are listening, that they check that out. So that's great. Have in that same vein, have any kind of bigger developers or just any developers really? I mean, how often do developers themselves reach out for kind of collaboration or advice on aspects like that? Does that happen often, or is that rare?
All the time. No, okay. I mean, there's never a day that goes by that someone in our organization isn't talking to developers about the next game coming out, and they're, more golden robots waiting off camera to beat me down for breaking an NDA than I can tell you about. So
Fair enough. Fair
yeah.
enough.
So it's one of those things where it's always happening. It's always in the background, even when it seems like maybe the industry doesn't care. I can promise you they do, and they're trying to figure it out.
That's good. That's good to hear. Because we touched earlier around how that's changed over the years. Is it fair to say that the number of developers and kind of resources reaching out to you for that advice now is a lot different than it was even several years ago? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's changed a lot. The kind of advice is more specific now. It's
Okay.
earlier in the development cycle, and
Good.
it's really at a point where people are trying to make sure it gets in there under budget like it should have been.
Yeah. That's excellent, man. That's excellent.
Yeah.
So wrapping this up, what's next for you? I mean, individually, I feel like I said, it's someone looking at you and what you've accomplished is incredibly, admirable to me. And it's just, it's an inspiration is what I'll say. So, in terms of Spohn Together and what you're accomplishing there, you have any other, big plans you want to talk about or anything kind of in mind that you're looking to focus on here in the future?
I always tell people if you really want to keep up with what I'm doing, you pay attention to my Twitter, and that'll be the best place to find out, because I'm always trying to invent new ways to help make people be the best versions of themselves. So as I continue to age up in this industry, I realize that there are other things that I want to do in order to try to help. I'm very much into philosophy nowadays. I very much like putting out those videos and trying to show people ways they can sort of be a little more comfortable in who they are. So what's next for me is just continuing on how to do bigger and better things. That's getting harder now that I've got friends with Ryan Reynolds and I know The Rock on the list. Getting higher than that is hard.
Yes.
But I will say, to the points that you and I have been talking about all day, for anyone out there who is like, man, this guy talks a lot about the little guy for somebody who's friends with Ryan Reynolds. It's like, that's true. But also, I have had many nights in the last 6 months where I felt like I don't do enough, where I felt like I could be doing more, or that I'm letting people down. And it doesn't matter how much, someone thinks that, you're doing well, or how many times you're told that you're inspirational. There's always that little voice in your mind that goes, they're just being kind. And so I'm have no problem saying that I'm one of the people that still continues to struggle with that. Like, how do I do better and how do I do more? So what am I up to next? Who knows? I guess we'll see whatever I pull out of my hat next.
I think it's just human nature, right?
Right.
Yeah, but so yeah, when I saw you post the video with Ryan Reynolds, I think it was back in November, if I remember correctly. It was just really cool to see, because we were talking earlier about genuineness, regardless of how big or small you are in terms of an audience. And Ryan just seems like one of those guys who's truly genuine. So that was really cool to see for you there.
He's a good dude.
That's good. Well, honestly, Stephen, this has been, like I said, it's been a pleasure. I thank you so much for coming out and chatting with me and kind of chatting with the audience and spreading some of your thoughts. And it's a real honor to continue to kind of spread, like we said, the campaign I've got going here. And, as well, like I'll shout out as well that, anyone who knows that they buy merchandise from us, like these Good in Gaming shirts, all profits 100% go to our charity partners, which Able Gamers has been since we started doing merchandise. So
thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just everything we talked about, right, is the reason why. So just want to thank you again. And is there anything else you want to touch on before we head out?
I think it was a great show, and I appreciate you bringing me on here to hang out and talk about some cool stuff together. And hopefully people didn't tune out when we got preachy. So make good choices, kids.
That's a perfect end cap. So we'll go ahead and there. This is Industry Perspectives. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we will see you next time.